So, Athava, would you like to go to next?
Yeah, for sure. So to echo what Lillian's just said, thank you so much for inviting me and the rest of the panelists for this really interesting session over here. So I basically started. I was just really interested in entrepreneurship in high school. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach than Lillian, just kind of talk about where I started and then where I've gotten to now. So I was really interested in entrepreneurship in high school. Kind of came here to explore that because Berkeley is a really great place for it. Really found product management by talking to a few people in there, and I realized, hey, like this is a cool uh, field in order to be able to combine both of my interests in tech, in business. For context, I'm a computer science and business administration double major. And so I was first a product management intern at Visa after my freshman year. I honestly got it pretty much by fluke. I just applied on LinkedIn, saw it one day, I was like, cool, this sounds really awesome. Went there, loved the experience. I got to work on a variety of different things, from comparative analysis to again the actual product roadmap of a new project. Then I realized I needed to, in order to become a successful product manager, I wanted to gain more experience across engineering and business. And so the next summer, I wanted to gain experience in the cloud, and so I joined AWS or that's Amazon Web Services, as a solutions architect intern. And then the following fall, so this last fall 2020, I wanted to understand more about the business side. And I was at TikTok working on marketing, operations, and strategy. And then now that I kind of gained breadth across both sides of engineering and business, I wanted to go back to product management because that's really what I wanted to do. And so this past summer, I was at Salesforce working as a product manager, specifically in the security organization. And that was really interesting. Got to build out business metrics for leadership at Salesforce for a particular security product. And yeah, I'll be going back there full time. So I'm really excited to be kind of continuing over there. It was a really great time. Happy to talk more about any of those experiences. But yeah.
All right, thank you, Athava. So we have another panelist who also did internship at Salesforce. So Karina, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Karina. I also interned at Salesforce this past summer. I was a business analyst within the Commerce Cloud division. And so there I was just working on a lot of market research on a go-to-market strategy team. So that was really interesting. Kind of similar to Atharva, I've been in tech most of my college experience. The 2 summers previous to this past one, I worked at smaller tech startups, one based in New York and one based in Ireland, doing carrier management software and HR software. So I knew I was interested in kind of staying in the tech space, and working at Salesforce was a great experience. Such an innovative company. So happy to dive deeper into that later.
Great, thank you, Karina. Josh, would you like to introduce your experience working at, introduce your rundown of experience by landing an internship at Apple?
Yes, thanks so much, Karen. So hi, everyone. I'm Josh. I am also a senior in Haas. And I came to Berkeley thinking I wanted to study business and pursued a lot with that, and then found data science along the way and have added that as a minor. And I think the combination of those two things led me to my internship after freshman and sophomore year. And I was doing more of a business analyst role and combining those two things at a tech startup. And through that, I really found that I loved working at tech companies and wanted to continue to pursue that. And I really liked having a combination of using data science, but really to leverage business decisions and kind of being able to have a say in the strategy from some of the insights. And so with that, I interned in finance at Apple, and I was working on the iPhone sales finance team, and I was doing a lot of forecasting for more of the current quarter in terms of iPhone global sales. And so I had a phenomenal experience, and I'm going back next year to do a 2-year rotational program where we do 8 3-month rotations on various finance teams, and then after the 2 years, decide where we want to continue, what team we want to continue on.
All right, thank you, Josh. So we have one recent alum, Danielle, who is now working at LinkedIn as the SOAR program. Would you like to briefly introduce yourself, Danielle?
Of course. Hello, everybody. My name is Danielle, and I just graduated from Berkeley last year. I'm currently working at LinkedIn in their SOAR program, which stands for Strategy, Operations, and Analytics, and it's the entry-level business operations rotational program. Before that, I actually also interned at Salesforce. So I was doing product marketing the summer before my senior year. And before that, the 2 summers prior was also doing product marketing at tech companies.
Great, thank you, Danielle. So next we are going to talk about your roles. Lillian, I know that you have shared a lot of information on your social media, but can you unpack again? I know you work in product marketing, so what is your role and who do you work with? What tools did you use in your day-to-day, and what projects did you work on?
Definitely. So I guess I can first talk about my general role and responsibilities over the summer. Since every intern is placed on this different team, every intern has a different experience. So in terms of what I did, I was working mostly within the restaurant vertical within Google for Small Business. So in the beginning, I was doing a lot of research on the vertical as well as partnership research. So those are more sort of general background information to help me gain a better understanding of how the market landscape looked like. And when I was doing a lot of this research, I was meeting with other external stakeholders on related teams. So this included product marketing managers within different teams within the ads org, but not so much farther than that. So I didn't work with engineering PMs or sales or anything like that. It was mostly other marketing people within sort of related teams. So that was sort of like the first 3-ish weeks getting the background information. And after that, I was going to do user testing and gathering feedback on our current website. So there's this really interesting tool that I didn't know before called usertesting.com. So you can actually input some questions that you have about a certain topic. So for example, our website. So input those questions and we have real restaurant owners respond to those questions using a live video format. And after all the responses are aggregated, you're able to see like commonalities of what they said and pull those insights out, and later created a report and also recommendations based on what they said in order to improve the website for future use. So that was a pretty long part of the project that was pretty interesting as well. Other things I did, including handling paid ads. So our team was given a budget to basically craft some of the ads that go out to these targeted audiences. So when they search a specific keyword, they'll see these display ads pop up on their search. And other things included social media posts. So interesting enough, with big companies like Google, they actually outsource a lot of their marketing work to other PR marketing agencies. So for example, the images and drawings that you see by Google, and sometimes the websites of different products aren't actually made in-house. They are made by external agencies. So we work a lot with external agencies on how to coordinate some of these, and we let them know our vision and what we want to see. So I worked with an external agency that was really interesting. And at the end of the internship, I was mainly suggesting recommendations for our team to utilize once I left after the summer. So this kind of reminds me of marketing consulting, where you're kind of consulting for your team, but you're like an in-house marketing consultant, if that makes sense. And in terms of tools I use, there's a lot of Google Suite, so docs and sheets, and a lot of collaboration between different people, getting ideas approved, things like that. The website mentioned earlier, usertesting.com, which I thought was really interesting, and working with the external agencies. So those are main tools that we use. And in terms of product marketing at Google, so I'd say product marketing in general is a pretty broad term. Like it says product marketing, but it's more of an umbrella term that encapsulates different types of marketing. So for example, there's different types of marketing like growth marketing, brand marketing, strategy and operations, and just under marketing, which is I thought was a very interesting thing when I heard about that. There's kind of like a spectrum, and depending on the team you're placed on is the type of marketing that you're mainly focused on. So I'd say for my role, it was more of growth marketing. So trying to acquire more users, not as much on the product side. So I think just really depends on the different teams. And yeah, that was basically the main experience I had.
Great. Thank you, Lillian. That's very insightful. So, Athava, I know product management is recently, I heard so many students talking about that, but I also know that it's hard to get in purely with a business degree. And can you unpack a little bit about why this, cross-disciplinary type of role and would have, who do you work with and what tools do you use?
Yeah, for sure. So as a product manager, you're working with like a variety of stakeholders. I think that's one of the things that really attracted me to the position in the first place. Um, sorry about that. So like as a product manager, what you're really there to do is you're coordinating, let's say the ideation, design, development, and launch really of a particular feature or product that that a company is working on. So at a smaller company, you're more likely to be launching like a bigger chunk of it. Bigger company, maybe not so much. But basically, during my internship, what I had to do, since my product was very technical, I was mainly interfacing with engineers, and the other stakeholders were like Salesforce executives. So the chief trust officer had requested business metrics for the particular authentication product that I was working on. And so I was really there to support my mentor who was working on that product and basically define, design, and launch a particular dashboard that would help executives understand that. So what I had to do was I had to first define the business metrics that were going to be necessary for this product. Then actually make mock-ups for the dashboard and see how it would actually look. And then because our engineering resources were low, and since I was a computer science major, I figured that it'd make the most sense if I built out the dashboard myself. And so I got a chance to actually dabble in developing that dashboard and pushing it out into production by the end of that internship. So I got really a gamut of PM challenges that summer. So I had to first understand and dive deep into what the product really does in order to understand the best metrics to track it. Then I had to really ideate and iterate on my designs for the dashboard, really take a perspective from like the users who would be leaders and understand, okay, like what are the most useful aspects of this dashboard that they would need to be able to quickly understand how this product's doing. And the last is, to actually develop something myself and work with engineering to, be able to make those prioritization trade-offs between, okay, do we really need this metric? Like what are the P0, P1 things that we need to really get done versus later priorities? So having that, I think one thing that I had to really learn as a PM is that ownership mindset. One of the things that I think is very different from a lot of roles is, especially as an intern, you're normally just given, a project in a particular role. So, hey, here's your project, go work on it, deliver this to me in the next week or so. And, you're just kind of handed tasks to do. So at the beginning of my internship, I figured out that was not the case at all. So when I was kind of asking my mentor questions about, how should I kind of define, the particular project? Like, is there a particular way I should be doing it? He just kind of looked at me and said, well, you're the product manager. What do you want to do? And that was kind of it was just a mindset shift altogether. I'd never really thought about that. I was like, oh, okay, so this is really up to me as to how this is going to proceed. So I had a lot of meetings. That's pretty much what happens as a PM. You have to work with a lot of people. So you have a lot of meetings pretty much constantly about making sure everyone's aligned on what's going to be happening with this particular project. But in my previous internship as a PM at Visa, I worked with a variety of different people. So, so I worked with obviously engineers, but also worked with sales people, marketing people, legal as well, because since it's a payment service that they're all like really, really important. And so I had to work with a lot of different people there. The tools I would say across both internships, Salesforce has a variety of proprietary tools that we have to work with for data analysis and collection. But the obvious are more, Microsoft PowerPoint, Excel, Google Slides, and obviously a variety of different document making software. So, like, for example, Notion. Sometimes you might have to use that, or there's I want to say like data analysis and data science is also a significant part of metrics. And in general, like for a PM, I think it's becoming more and more data driven. So I would recommend, if you are looking to that, brushing up on like SQL or Mongo DB, or Tableau, Microsoft Power BI, those sort of tools, because you'll be likely using one of them during your internship. But yeah, I think that's the majority of what I wanted to say about it. Essentially just working with a lot of people as a PM, a bunch of different meetings, but you're creating something pretty much from scratch in a lot of different cases. But yeah.
Right, thank you, Athava. You mentioned data driven and then some like SQL, Tableau, those tools. I see there are a growing number of students at Haas who had a data science minor or major, so they would be interested in business analytics role. So, Karina, would you like to unpack your role for your internship?
Yeah, absolutely. So, being a business analyst is a very vague term and it can mean a lot of different things. And I think that a lot of the time it is very sort of data driven and driven by a lot of those more technical tools. My experience was a little bit different. On being on a strategy team, it was a very business focused team, and we were kind of separate from the product itself. So the tools I were using were like a little simpler, I would say. I did a lot of presentation making on Google Slides. And one of the things I did a lot of was market research. And so I ran surveys through different tools, such as like Google surveys, but also SurveyMonkey. I worked on figuring out how to create Facebook ads and target different audiences. And so I was running focus groups, things like that. So a lot more qualitative data is what I was dealing with. And so that kind of made my project a bit more independent. Being on a strategy team, I was given a big project at the beginning and then kind of told to figure out how I wanted to do it, and just like reach out if I needed help, essentially. And so I was given a lot of freedom to just do research on my own using the internet, different white papers and research studies that had been done around different industries. And so that allowed me to kind of take my project where I wanted to go. And then as I got further into the summer, I realized that I wasn't really taking advantage of all of the tools that Salesforce has and that I could be learning. So I asked my manager to kind of get more involved in the product itself and do some more technical type projects. And so that led me to work more with the solution engineers at Salesforce, which are essentially salespeople who know the product really well and build demos for clients. And so that allowed me to get a little bit more technical and start understanding the product a bit more and build demos and customer journeys to be presented to clients. So that was kind of the progression of my internship. But I would say that if you're looking to go into a sort of business analyst role, definitely read the job description very carefully and understand what's actually being asked of you, because it can be very different from role to role. And so mine was kind of more marketing and research based, and others can be a lot more technical and finance based.
All right, thank you, Karina. So Josh, you mentioned your internship is supporting iPhone sales. So I think corporate finance is a role that I think students don't know much enough about. Can you tell us a little bit more about how do you, in your corporate finance role, create an impact?
Yeah, totally. So corporate finance, like some of the other people, other panelists have said, is super broad and can encompass a lot of things. And a lot of them are what you would typically think of in terms of finance. I think a lot of times, and like in 103, it's more of a banking type of finance than a corporate type of finance for people who have taken that. So in my role in particular, it was about forecasting the sales and building the sales targets for the iPhone globally around these sales. And then as a result of that, that would then go through other departments and other roles to create budgets and create metrics to evaluate and all that. And so that was really what I was working on in particular. And I was particularly working on, like I said, current quarter forecasting. And so looking on a weekly basis and reevaluating each week. But generally, I think to make an impact in corporate finance, or what corporate finance as a whole, I kind of think of it as anything that's influencing, revenue projections or cost decisions, or pricing, as well as just the accounting functions. And so that at Apple, at least, there's a bunch of different teams for iPhone, as well as there's like iPad, Mac, all those teams, services, and then there's some more traditional like operations finance, and so managing the finance and the costs of the supply chain, as well as like a financial planning and analysis. And so rolling everything up, so rolling the unit projections up into revenue, into profit, as well as product, like finance for product marketing. And so that has to do a lot with pricing and understanding the finance implications of various pricing and pricing models and all of that. For me, particularly, how I think I made an impact through the summer was the main projects I was working on was really using data that they've known they had, but haven't really had a chance to actually utilize. And so with mainly Excel and Tableau, building models to create things that are dynamic that they don't really have to work on, but they can just use once I left. And so a big part of that was, especially in Tableau, just its functionality allows it to be a lot more sustaining and dynamic than Excel. And so understanding past growth trends on a rolling basis so they can see some anomalies and really best accurately predict their forecasting as a result of that.
Right. Thank you, Josh. So Danielle, I know that you started the LinkedIn Soul program as full-time. So can you tell a little bit about what's your current rotation, and then maybe things that you have started working on, and then maybe also the part that you enjoy, and then things are less enjoyable.
Of course. So my first rotation is on the business operations analytics team. So basically they work pretty cross-functionally across all the BizOps functions for the highest priority projects. So in terms of the projects I'm currently working on, I don't know how specific I can be, but I can talk like high level. So I've worked on 3 so far in the 3 months I've been here. One, setting like specific quarterly targets for a specific product of LinkedIn. The second project, working on performance management, so seeing how a product is performing over time, if there's any issues that we need to surface with that. For example, have like a war room or something like that, if a metric isn't hitting what we want it to hit, or if something's going well, analyzing why it's doing well. And the third project is, there's currently like an ongoing pilot program for a specific vertical that we're targeting. So I'm exploring how that should be expanded. So in terms of just the things overall, I know you mentioned talking about tools I use in my everyday activities. I use a lot of SQL. A lot of it is for data pulls. Of course, I use a lot of Excel. I'd say my work also does involve a lot of stakeholder management and project management. So it's a lot of coordinating moving parts as someone in BizOps, which is definitely more than I expected, thinking about like what BizOps is in general. In terms of what I really enjoy about my work, I think it's very variable, and I get to have a lot of say pretty early on in my career, which is definitely something that I didn't necessarily expect to come out of college. So it's great to be able to have that ownership and responsibility. I'd say in terms of the least enjoyable, it's kind of the flip side of that. Like, it is a lot of responsibility, and it can be a little bit stressful at times.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Danielle. Have some technical issues here. I can't, sorry. Sorry. Can everyone hear me? All right, good. Sorry. So we are we want to make sure we also cover the very important portion of recruiting. And I know you also have a lot of insights to share. So Danielle, would you like to go ahead and start sharing, even though SOAR programs application already closed, what is your preparation for application, and what do you think, what are the top skills this program is particularly looking for?
Yeah, so the way the application process works is it starts with like a resume review, there's an Excel test, there's a phone screening, and then there's a case, and then the final round is 4 parts. It's a typical case, there's a presentation case, a group case, and then behavioral section. So the last part is a bit intense. I'd say the biggest preparation you can do is learning how to do a case interview. That's not something that I'd done prior because I hadn't intended on going into consulting. Like I mentioned, all my previous internships were in product marketing in tech. So I did a lot of preparation in terms of how a case interview worked. And then I suppose for the Excel test, I just had to brush up on my Excel skills, really know how to use pivot tables. I'd say everything besides that is pretty standard for any other tech interview, just knowing how to do behavioral interview, practicing with friends, etc.
Great, thank you. So Lillian, at the very beginning, you mentioned Bold is still accepting applications, I think until the end of this weekend. So can you briefly talk about how you navigate the recruiting process?
Yeah, so I think the application closes on the 18th. I just searched it up. And basically the interviews, they're kind of on a rolling basis depending on when you submit your application. So it says interviews are rolling through March of the next year. So I think it's hard to anticipate when you would probably get an interview, but personally, I remember receiving notification around a month after I applied. And the Bold interview was pretty short, I'd say. It's only like 2 interviews back to back for 45 minutes each. So it's all done in one sitting. There's no like phone screens or final rounds or anything like that. In terms of the interview itself, they're mainly behavioral questions and some case-like questions that are sort of representative like consulting case interviews, but they're much shorter and it's sort of like one-off questions versus like a series of questions. Basically, in terms of preparation, a lot of videos in terms of case interview videos on YouTube. So I just Googled case interview questions. Also, if you Google product marketing questions, there are more specific types of kind of those like tech questions that's more specific to the industry. I'd also recommend searching up and learning about the products that Google or any other tech company you're interviewing has, just because a lot of their questions kind of surround the products in particular. They'll ask questions about your opinion on them. So I think it's just good to sort of research, inform your own opinion on what you like or dislike about a product. So product sense, things like that. So that's just my recommended preparation.
Right, great. Thank you, Lillian. Josh, I know that Apple's internship program opens really early in the summer and then close also very, very soon. So can you tell a little bit about how to prepare for an early accelerated recruiting timeline?
Yes, definitely. So the recruiting, it's not really a strict finite date, but typically, at least for me, I applied back in May of the year prior to my internship, and then interviewed in June, and then had already accepted my offer by mid-July. And I think it's, I think I was on the earlier end, but I don't think I was on the earlier end by a lot. And so it mainly happens during the summer. In terms of preparing, I think kind of similar to what Lillian said, I would really be very comfortable with Apple products. And I think a lot of us think we might be really familiar with Apple products, but there's a lot of Apple products and services that go far beyond the phone and the watch and the Mac and whatnot. And so being familiar with that and Apple's values and business model, it's mainly behavioral questions and some situationals, but it's not the type of thing where there's like a strict guide or casing guide that I that I think would be valuable. It's not something I did. I just really was aware of, my past experiences, how I learned from them. And then it was pretty well researched on Apple and what's going on with them.
Great, thank you. So Athava, I know that PM recruiting also is early and competitive. So can you share a little bit about your story navigating it?
Yeah, for sure. So as you said, PM recruiting is generally like decently early. So what that means is I've seen some of the first positions open up last July, but I think the majority of them came out like for internships in like early August. Full time, I think at least this year has been a bit later, which is a bit weird. Normally it's like quite early. Some of them were pretty early, for example, and it's also they have extremely shortened timelines. So for example, Facebook, their rotational product manager program was only open for 4 days at the end of July of this year. So if you didn't apply in that in those 4 days, you just weren't going to get a chance to actually be in the recruitment process. Google this year was only 2 days versus 2 weeks last year. So that I think also illustrates how how much more popular PM is getting these days. Literally thousands of applications are streaming in during that time. Uber and Lyft tend to recruit. I think they're like open. I think Lyft opened up August 6th of this year. Uber was like a bit before that. And I think it ended August 16th. So generally, like once you're, honestly, it kind of sucks sometimes where you're doing your internship during a summer and then you already start recruiting for either the next summer or for full time, pretty much while you're in that internship already. And so that's generally how PM recruiting works. They also, I think, to differentiate candidates, have started to require either cover letters or like a paragraph about like why you want to join the company or why you want to join the program or why PM, like just a prompt basically. And the way that PM recruiting works is you have like an initial, you submit your resume, you might have like a recruiter phone screen, and then you might have like a take home assignment. So I've seen that introduced a lot for full-time applications, internships. I know that Duolingo is doing that now. So what a take-home assessment is basically, they might give you a prompt like, for example, hey, can you ideate a new feature for Duolingo in 10 slides and tell us how you would, ideate it, design it, develop it, launch it, all that sort of stuff. And so like basically a slide deck on how you'd solve that problem. And so you'd submit that. If you make it past that, you might have like a 45-minute round with a product manager, just kind of evaluating your product sense, asking you about your favorite product, maybe giving you a design challenge. For example, for Microsoft, I remember getting a question that was, my prompt was 3 words. It was just design a kitchen. And that's work with that to give them a solution that was actually pretty interesting. And so stuff like that, I think is unique to PM. Apart from that, their final round typically normally like a strategy interview, some sort of might have a technical one like for system design, but it's not that common. Definitely behavioral. They love seeing team fit for PM, and probably some sort of product case, just to evaluate again your product sense. So PM recruiting is somewhat daunting, but yeah, that's so. As I said, generally kind of starts early. I think one of the things to really pay attention to for PM is there aren't that many applications out there. So whenever you actual opportunities. So when you find one, like I would recommend applying as soon as possible because they tend to shut down really quick. And so that's what my game plan was going into last year and this year, which was just seeing an opportunity, just kind of dropping everything as much as I can and just applying immediately. Of course, hopefully like with a referral. As I said, there's a lot of people who apply. But yeah, I would say it's, just got to keep in mind it's a numbers game for sure. Just keep applying to all the opportunities that you do see, because I think that's what helped me a lot in just getting responses. I might get rejected from a bunch of companies, but there might be a couple others that are interested. So yeah, just make sure to keep that in mind.
Great, thank you. So we are going to talk about referral very quick. So Karina, can you unpack your recruiting experience with us as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So mine was a little bit different from other ones that have been said. At least at Salesforce, they put out a lot of internship opportunities on a rolling basis. And so you can kind of just apply to ones as they come. And so my business analysis role was not actually posted until December of 2020 for summer of 2021. And I didn't actually receive an offer until March of 2021. So they kind of take their time at Salesforce, and I don't really know if this is applicable to other tech companies, but it's kind of just all on a rolling basis and depends which teams need headcount, which ones are available at certain times, and so you just kind of have to be constantly checking the recruiting portals to look for roles. And yeah, I think that business analyst roles will differ at a lot of different companies. So this isn't like the one true statement about business analyst roles. But in my experience, the interviews were pretty behavioral. I had 3 rounds of interviews, mostly behavioral, some situational, like what might you think about this idea or how would you go about researching this kind of project? But pretty much just behavioral, and they just want to gauge your interest in technology and the company itself. They don't really expect you to have an understanding of Salesforce products, because it's B2B and they can be quite hard to understand from a consumer's point of view. But they're more just looking for your interest in the company and like how you might go about certain situations and fit into the culture.
Great, thank you, Karina. So I think I'll go with my final questions. We want to make sure we have enough time for audience to ask questions. So my final question would be in general, how to prepare for a role like your internship or full-time job. I know I got a lot of questions about do I contact recruiter? Do I cold call people to get referral? And then maybe some classes that you would recommend to take before applying to a role like this. So Danielle, would you like to go ahead and start telling us your experience applying to the LinkedIn SOAR program?
Sure. I think in terms of preparation, like I mentioned, it's very case heavy. So just doing a lot of practice cases. It is a little bit different from consulting cases. It's a little bit more conversational, I'd say, and a little bit more creative, but you can still use, the same case books, etc. Just practicing with people is super helpful. And again, they're not necessarily looking for you to answer it in the exact same way someone in consulting would. It's more about just seeing the way you think and being an internal consultant at LinkedIn. I'd say in terms of other things, one resource I would recommend checking out is TechPod. It's this community of students who are helping other students break into non-technical roles in tech. So I definitely found that super helpful and would recommend checking them out. Also, I'd say you have to know some basic Excel things. So if you're interested in a role in BizOps, just brushing up on your Excel skills, basically just really know how to use pivot tables is the biggest thing. Other things are, I mentioned to use SQL, but they do actually teach you that in the onboarding process for LinkedIn. So you don't necessarily have to know that going in, but it might be helpful just to have. And it sounds like it's just becoming a more respected and reputable and necessary tool for a lot of different positions. So just good to know overall. And then I'd say in terms of overall classes I enjoyed, I think because this role is a lot about strategic thinking and creativity, a lot of the classes that I think prepared me the best were a lot of the more elective classes I took, just in terms of thinking outside the box and in a strategy way, if that makes sense.
All right, thank you, Danielle. So Lillian, I know you already touched part of the bold internship application, but can you share us your successful story, your preparation, and maybe give advice who are currently applying or would be applying in the future?
Definitely. I think the part about referrals, I think it's a nice to have, but I definitely know there are people who got into the internship without one. So it's kind of one of those things, whereas if you have it, it would be nice, but I don't think it's something to stress over. That's one thing. I think in terms of the application itself, the resume is pretty important because a lot of it is based on your experience and how those experiences line up with what the program is looking for. So I say try to use a lot of keywords you find in like the posting. I guess if you're interested in marketing specifically, using a lot of marketing keywords throughout the resume to kind of like show yourself that you are very interested in the specific field, because I think the interest is what they're looking for too. In terms of interviews, I think a really helpful resource that I didn't really know about, but my interviewer actually told me about it after my interview is TechCrunch, like reading tech news, because the more you read about it, the more it's kind of like ingrained in your head. So even when they ask a question not super related to it, your subconscious kind of like, I guess, tells you like the sense of the question, if that makes sense. So reading a lot of the tech news out there to get to know the trends and things like that. In terms of practicing, just going through online questions, a lot of them can be found on YouTube, Glassdoor, a lot of like online resources, maybe search the internet. So those are helpful. Maybe practice with a friend or something. Behavioral questions, I think, are also one of the most important pieces. So something that I thought was really helpful for me is I opened a Google Doc and I just found like the top 20 most common behavioral questions, put them on Google Doc and write my answers to those questions. That way, when I'm reviewing before an interview, I kind of know the points I want to hit. And if the questions they ask are differently worded, but similar to the ones that you studied before, it kind of comes faster to you. So I think that was super helpful. And yeah, those are most of my tips.
All right, thank you, Lillian. Josh, would you like to go sharing with your peers about your successful story, and then how to best prepare for a role in corporate finance?
Yes, definitely. I think the best classes I've taken in terms of preparing weren't necessarily ones that taught me the exact skills that I would use, but taught me how to think critically about what I was doing and really give me a guide in terms of how to approach the problem solving. I would really say taking some data science classes and just understanding how to look at data and how to approach it was super, super helpful. Even though the data science class I've taken were in Python, I wasn't using Python. The skills are really transferable kind of across a lot of different platforms, and being able to understand how to generally take a bunch of data and get some insights about it, regardless of what medium you're using, I think is really valuable, as well as just understanding how internally, especially, businesses think about finances. And so I think managerial accounting is useful for that, and to just understand some of the thought processes behind budgeting and setting targets and managing different costs across departments of such a large company. That was really valuable, particularly just during the recruiting timeline. I think because of the size of these companies, you're not going to be looking at finance on such a large scale, but you're focusing on one particular thing. And so I think the data science things are really helpful once you're there. But in terms of preparing, I think, and I loved what Lillian said about reading tech news and just understanding how these companies think and their strategies, and just being able to frame that when answering any questions and talking with anyone is really valuable.
Great, thank you, Josh. And I know that you have to leave it too, so when the time comes, feel free to do so. All right. So
great. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, thank you for joining us. Athava, PM recruiting. I know you touched a little bit about that. So, but would you like to give additional advice about for students who are interested in this field?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the best ways to stand out in the process is to have like a particular, like if you have like a side project, or you've like maybe, worked at a startup before, or you've done anything like entrepreneurial, like what they're really looking for is someone who loves to build things, someone who's like really passionate about, innovating like new ideas, taking new things to market. That's what really they're looking for, like that sense of passion for innovation. And so that's what I would really recommend like doing. Like, let's say you don't really have an internship or any experience, like that's totally fine. I would say actually some of the more successful people I've seen in like PM recruiting actually don't really have any PM experiences or anything like that. They just have done like a side project or they've had something before that they can, really talk about for a while that they're really passionate about. And so I think that's like a clear differentiator for it. As I just want to reiterate the fact that you really want to apply early and apply often because there just aren't that many opportunities compared to say like engineering or business, specifically in product management. And they're they're generally pretty competitive because there are just so many applicants over there. So that's I think the way to differentiate yourself is just to show a lot of interest. Get referrals, make those connections now, talk to those people, and I think that's mock with a partner for product interviews. One of the things that I definitely recommend to prep for them, read Cracking the PM Interview. I think honestly it gives you a very solid understanding of how to go about PM recruiting. So I would highly recommend getting started with that and then mock with anyone else interested in product. Your first one may not be so good, but it never is for anyone. But as you really keep prepping, it'll get a lot better. So I would really recommend doing that. I think those are some of the more important tips that I have.
Right. Thank you, Asava. So, Karina, would you like to close with the recruiting related question about sharing your experience maybe working with recruiters and alumni in the whole recruiting process?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did not have a referral in my recruiting process. I know that quite a few other people did, but kind of like Lillian said, like it's very possible to do well in these roles without referrals. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but rather focus on really aligning your resume and if there's a cover letter, your cover letter to the role itself and not just sending in a general resume. So my role was specifically on Commerce Cloud, which is one of the many services or products that Salesforce sells. And so I knew that going in. And so when I was preparing my resume, I thought about one of my previous experiences, which had been at a carrier management software company, which works in the exact same industry of e-commerce. And so I found ways to like really highlight that on my resume and talk about my interests there and the experience I'd had in my cover letter. And I think that gave me a huge leg up because when I got into the interviews, like the first thing they said was, wow, tell me about this experience. You've already worked in this industry, which is like, I think really helpful. And I was able to provide a lot of insights and just kind of use lingo that they weren't expecting me to know. So I think making sure that you really are reading the job descriptions fully and figuring out how you can best align and highlight certain skills will help you really stand out in these kinds of applications, especially for a lot of these companies, which are really large. Like Atharva mentioned, they're getting thousands of applications. And so being able to kind of stand out with one or two words on your resume is great. Another thing that I did to prepare or that really helped me, I think, was having done previous research projects and being able to talk about how I think about the projects that I do and how I sort of navigate them. I'm part of a marketing consulting club on campus, and so I've done a lot of research projects there, and being able to talk about how I think through things and how I would approach certain problems is really helpful. So I would say preparing for any kind of research or analyst type role, thinking about any time you've worked on like a long-term group project or some kind of extracurricular that you're involved in, and how you really thought about everything you were doing, what you learned from it, and how you would kind of fix the issues that occurred is really helpful. And being able to communicate that really well will help you stand out in interviews.
Great. Thank you so much, Karina. So this concludes my interview part, and I said we are going to do breakout rooms, but unfortunately there are some technical issues that I face in my desktop that I have. If I want to do breakout room, I have to like end the meeting. So I decided to have the rest of the 15 minutes to be Q&A. So before that, I would like to do a post-event survey. So everyone in this meeting, I hope you learn a lot of critical information regarding business roles in tech. So I would like to invite you to participate in this poll to let me know your learning outcomes. That would be really helpful because I'm assessing this program. All right. And then, so our panelist is going to stay here for another 15 minutes. So I would like to suggest you just unmute yourself or send chat to everyone, because I'm not able to see it like in my host account. So any questions that you feel, if you want to have a specific panelist to answer, feel free to point that out. All right, we're going to start the Q&A in just a few seconds. All right, great, thank you. We have, I'm glad that a lot of you, about 60% of you have a better understanding of the role. And then, yeah, I know that you still need time to building your confidence in, creating recruiting strategies. But definitely, I see a huge increase that a lot of students decided they would like to reach out to more current students and alumni to support the career. That's very wonderful. All right, thank you for participating. So now, with that, I'm going to open for audience questions. Anyone who would like to ask a question? Oh, I do see a question. What is your thoughts on non-tech business roles in tech? I think this is a little general. Would you like to elaborate a little bit? Or students, if you have questions, would you like to just unmute yourself and ask our panelists? So Sophie asked a question about how important it is. Who wanna start? I think Lillian and Karina mentioned referral isn't a must, but how do you navigate networking? Would you like to start, Lillian?
Yeah, I'd say a lot of the quote unquote networking that I've done through college isn't exactly LinkedIn reaching out, but I've met a lot of peers within Berkeley, like clubs and classes. And I think if you make those types of friendships organically at school, especially with people who are maybe 1 or 2 years older than you, they can really help you out later on. I know this is more of a long-term strategy, but I think for me it's worked pretty well. And I think if you're when you become like closer in like a relationship, mentor relationship, I think this becomes a lot easier to navigate. But understand how a lot of people they come into Berkeley not knowing people. So I think cold outreach does pretty well too. And I try not to approach it as in I want a referral from this person sort of sense, but try to get to know themselves as a person and what they do in their job. I think it's really interesting. And I think you'd be surprised how many people actually are willing to talk about these things and answer messages, because I've definitely throughout like reaching out to random people have made like really cool friendships, like genuine friendships, and like just meeting people through LinkedIn was really interesting. So I try to approach it in that sort of like making a new friend way, let's say.
Thank you, Lillian. Karina, do you have anything you want to add on?
I would just say the only other thing is definitely focus on networking before the job applications come out, but it's also very helpful to speak with people at the company when you have an interview. So like one thing that helped me at Salesforce was previous Berkeley alum or just like friends who I knew worked at Salesforce. I would have like a quick 15-minute call with them in the week leading up to my interview and just kind of learn more about the company, the product they work on, what they think about the company, and just learn a bit more so that I sounded more knowledgeable in my interview. I think knowing a lot about the company is really valuable in an interview and makes you come across like very well prepared. And networking that way is a really good way to do that and come across really well prepared and like kind of calm and confident in your answers. So definitely leverage the network, not just when you're like looking for a referral, but also when you're preparing for interviews.
Great, that's very insightful. Thank you, Karina. And I do have students who talk to me saying, I know networking is important, but I just don't know how to build connections and ask good questions. So Danielle and Athava, would you do you have any insights regarding this? How to build meaningful connections? Danielle, would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I'd say like, I think first of all, it kind of depends on like how you're reaching people. So like for all my experiences, I didn't have referrals, so I don't think it's like absolutely necessary, but I do think that it helps a lot, especially like some other panelists have mentioned, even in just providing the context to set you up for success in these interviews, even if they're not necessarily like getting you in the door with a referral. And it also depends on companies. So sometimes some companies like care a lot about referrals, some companies don't care at all. It can also depend on the specific role you're in. I'd say in terms of building meaningful relationships, like again, it depends on like where you're starting from. But I think even if you're just like outreaching to someone cold on LinkedIn, you can still form like really meaningful relationships. And I think that comes from talking to them and not just like rattling off like a list of questions, but trying to connect with them like more on who they are as a person. So for example, if you are connecting with them on LinkedIn, like focus more on what you see as like their interests and what they're following than necessarily like what their past work experiences are. I'd say also just spend like 15 minutes like looking through their profile, like just Googling them, seeing what comes up. I'd say that makes a huge difference. Having been, I feel like, both on the sending and receiving side of some of these networking conversations, it makes a big difference just like knowing some background information about the person you're talking to, because a lot of people don't do that. So just having some information about them, not being like stalking them, but saying like, hey, I saw on your profile that you were involved in like X club, especially if it's something that you guys can bond with. So for example, sometimes I'll see someone else who is also an alumni of Berkeley and I'll say, hey, like I saw you were in the same club as me and we'll chat about that. And that just ends up resulting in a lot more meaningful conversations. And it's a lot more important to build that relationship than to like extract X piece of information about a job. Because that information can always come later and it'll come more naturally if you first have this baseline of mutual interests and just a general understanding of each other as people.
Great. Thank you, Danielle. Asava, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've tried to do when it comes to like meaningful connections in recruiting is that you want to actually get to know them like as a person. Like I feel like that's one of the things that some people, when you're trying to network with them, like feel a little bit off about, where it's like, oh, I just want to learn about your experiences so I can get a referral and then I'm gonna dip. Peace. But I think actually getting to know them, like almost like getting to talk to them as a discussion, they're going to be a lot more likely to give you a if they have to write like a paragraph about like how they met you or like why they want to recommend you. They would probably have like a better opinion of you because they know you a bit better. They know a bit more about what to write about instead of just a random LinkedIn connection talking about about how they really really like this company without regarding like them as a person. And so that's what, and always I think whenever you're trying to make meaningful connections, emphasize the commonalities that you have with that person. So what that means is whenever I'm interested in a particular position, I look for first like connections who I already know, then friends of friends, and then I'll probably just reach out to like a Cal alum because I know that they're a lot more likely to respond. Or at that point, if that doesn't work out, if there just aren't many Cal alums of that company, I'll just like look for a particular person in my role and then try to see like who has the most like similar experiences to me, or maybe has the most interest related to what I have, or has worked at a previous company that I have, or things like that, like has some sort of commonality, or like maybe went to the same high school, or stuff like that. And so reaching out to them like with those commonalities makes you a lot more likely to be able to get that connection and also to have more to talk about with them. And when you really get to know them like as a person, it's not just a one-off thing. You get to continue that relationship if you'd want to. Let's say for positions down the road, let's say you get the referral but it doesn't really happen, that's fine. You still have that contact because you made a meaningful connection with them. So I think just ensuring that you ensure that you're really just talking to them like as a person instead of just okay, I'm just networking with this person. I think that helps a lot.
Great. Thank you, Asava. So any other questions from the audience?